All right.
So maybe we'll just go through the information that the Chemsex task force from OHTN put together, and we'll just have a link to
Is that what they called it, the Chemsex task force?
I think so. Let me just see. I can't remember. They called it the, I don't know what they're called.
Let's go with that.
Think tank. OHTN's crystal meth think tank.
Crystal meth think tank.
That's what they call it.
Yeah, because the Chemsex term is, I think we've maybe watched a little bit of Dave Stewart stuff.
It's not spread everywhere.
Not really. I mean, maybe it has a little bit, but I think that whole party and play concept. I mean, there's the UK version of it, and there's this. It's the same thing, but it just means different things to different people. But I like how they've, it's
crystal meth think tank.
Let's go with it. Yeah.
Okay. So, so I'll just sort of summarize the decks, and at any point you can just tell me anything that you think would be...
I will.
Okay. So when they were talking about crystal meth, specifically with the gay bisexual men who have sex with men, they were saying that the crystal meth use has increased among the general Canadian population in recent years. They mentioned that people living with HIV have higher rates of meth use than the general population. And gay and bisexual men who have sex with men who use meth, the substance use is frequently intertwined with their sexual lives, right? And they define party and play as the use of recreational drugs before or during planned sexual activity to sustain, enhance, disinhibit, or facilitate the experience. Unfortunately, when you read this, it sounds like fun, just the meth may be swallowed, snorted, smoked, absorbed through the rectum, or injected, with the injection producing the most intense rush. Most people use for more than one method, and snorting and smoking are the most common, at least when they did this.
Yeah. Well, like any, it's sounds like fun. Well, remember, like any drug, the first time, almost every drug, the first time, pretty good. Really, right?
Yeah.
Your first beer, your first line of Coke, your first anything is pretty good.
Yeah. Although the first cigarette and coffee.
Yeah. Well, that's the outlier.
Yeah. But the other stuff, absolutely. Yeah. It usually is good. And then there's, I don't know if it was chasing the dragon.
It is chasing the dragon, right?
Yeah. You could never get that high again. Right?
Yeah. You never get that high again. But that first time, pretty good. And and certainly for somebody who's lived in the with the stigma of being gay. For their whole life, and feeling awkward, feeling out of place for a lot of folks, that being these substances sort of make you feel kind of not so awkward, not so out of place.
Yeah.
Kind of powerful. Kind of, I look great. Look, wow, I look so hot. I look, wow, I've never seen these pecs look so good.
Yeah,
but they're the same pecs they were the day before, right?
Yeah. No, it's a friend of mine was saying that for some people, it just makes any shame go away.
Yeah,
so
it's
any
good.
shame,
I like that. Yeah.
Go away,
Yeah.
And so, and when you think about sexual intimacy, there's so much vulnerability linked with it. Imagine having no shame, right? But in a good way, right? So in Canada, most the time when they party and play, it's linked with meth, GHB, and ketamine. And a recent systematic review did find that meth use was most frequently reported party and play drug. Mm-hmm. Contemporary geosocial networking apps like Grindr do facilitate men's capacity to find and filter potential sexual partners for their interest in party and play. You can really find out what someone's into. You don't have to worry about the third date and figuring out, hey, do you like this or not? You can just do it right from the get-go.
Yep.
And now an increasing, so not the campsites like I was alluding to, but I'm so ignorant, but the increasing proportion of group sex now takes place in private homes rather than public bathhouses or bars like they did in the past, and these apps really facilitate that. So if somebody has a place and they have the app, they can get a bunch of people together there.
Yes, they can.
Okay. In Ontario, it's quite difficult to estimate the actual percent of meth use among gay and bisexual men who have sex with men. The national estimates compiled by Katie suggest that 5 to 20% of this group are involved in party and play. And a 2014 survey conducted at the World Pride event in Toronto found that 6.4% of the 800 to 900 Ontario men interviewed had used meth in the last 6 months. So that's like 1 in, like 1 in 20.
Yeah.
And the most recent data in 2017, 2018 from 1,700 Ontario men enrolled in the European Men's Internet Survey had about 7.7% reported using meth in the last year. Okay. So we're getting closer to like 1 in 15, 1 in 10, yeah.
And that assumes that I don't know how how those questions are asked, if there's other people in the room when they're being asked, right? I mean, is it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's going to be a factor if you know I'm walking down the street with my buddy and you're asking me that. I would never do that. Meth? Are you kidding?
Your wife,
or with if you're walking down the street at Pride with your wife and they're asking you that question.
Yeah, no, we just want our kids to be inclusive. You know, we just want our kids to be inclusive. So. So individuals with problematic meth use, they say it's a significant proportion of the LGBTQ people that are seeking substance use treatment. So, but I don't know what significant means. And it also suggests that for HIV positive gay and bisexual men who have sex with men, based on the OHTN cohort study, about 9.6% of them reported using meth in the last 6 months. So people who are HIV positive
are more likely to be in this group.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like, but definitely more likely. And like it's closer to that 10%.
Yeah.
So what does meth do in the body and the brain? So it increases dopamine in the brain, and it's a part of the brain's reward system. So you get feelings of pleasure in response to triggers, such as food and sex. That's what dopamine does. I mean, it's also a drug of salience, right? It helps people decide what's important and when. But here they're talking more about that reward. And what crystal meth does is, here it says it blocks the flow of dopamine between the nerve cells. But really what it does is you have your synaptic bouton and you have that presynaptic neuron. It increases the firing of it. It also is uptaked in the presynaptic one, and then it just floods your system because you have all these vesicles that have it sort of in there. And it keeps it sort of in the middle, right? It keeps it in the middle so it's not, the dopamine doesn't get taken back in. And it says that he holds it there for 4 to 10 hours. And the sustained pleasurable dopamine response may be many times stronger than the brain's response to natural triggers. So when you get like a high from like doing a podcast together, or like eating healthy food, or like spending time with your partner, it's not as immediately rewarding as that. And even compared to drugs like cocaine, it's more powerful. And it depletes the amount that you have in the brain as well. It contributes a lot to the crash afterwards that people feel after their session of use. And so it's almost like with alcohol, they say, you're having tomorrow's happiness today, you're borrowing from tomorrow. This is almost like extreme.
The higher you go, the lower you fall.
Yeah. That's exactly it, yeah. So with meth, it also increases alertness, confidence, energy level, and sometimes it eliminates almost completely the need to eat or sleep.
Yes.
It can raise the body temperature, heart rate, breathing. It lowers inhibitions, increases impulsivity, sexual arousal. And men often remain aroused without the orgasm as well. And 84% of gay and bisexual men who have sex with men in one study reported marathon sex with hours of constant interaction. It can impair the erection at times too, so it leads to erectile dysfunction, drugs, or to have, leading to the use of erectile dysfunction drugs, or to more bottom sex more frequently because it doesn't work as good as it used to before. And regular use can cause less dopamine to produce. It can cause anhedonia, which is just the lack of enjoyment and things you used to enjoy. And after you've used it regularly, some of these deficits can last for like 2 years afterwards, which is a real problem in recovery. Apart from the legal consequences in terms of risk, it's been associated with other harms, including an increased risk of HIV acquisition, along with other sexually transmitted and bloodborne infections. It can increase the viral load of people who have HIV who use meth. And there's also a risk that it impairs people's well-being in terms of physical, mental, emotional, and financial health as well. So When you think about working with somebody who uses crystal to party and play, you really have to also acknowledge the pros. It's not just like, oh, I just got gonorrhea this weekend, or I just got an STI. It's no, I had phenomenal, amazing sex, and I got the sexually transmitted infection. Because you don't talk about the good, it's almost like you're not going to be able to get to the other part of it.
And it's not just the sex; it's the connection, right? So you connected with people. You had people in your home. You were in somebody's home. You felt like you belonged. You had this. You felt whatever you want to call it. You felt needed. You felt wanted. You felt accepted. And that is a scary thing to try to replicate with something else, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are you gonna suggest that as an alternate behavior to replacing all those basic needs of somebody?
Yeah, and with the we talked about it reducing shame, right, in some way. And when you think about normal social interaction can be awkward, right? Like, what people are thinking, if they're judging, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And it's almost like you can ignore the negatives when you're on these meds. But you're absolutely right. And Dave Stewart talks about it a lot, and we've talked about it too, where all of a sudden you're a part of something. Right. You're part of a community. And that's why I think he was so explicit that you don't want to criticize people's mean of connection.
No.
It's if there's harms, yeah, sure, let's talk about it and figure it out. But when you criticize someone's means of connection, you're not going to get it anywhere else. And these people have already struggled with a lifetime of being judged, criticized, sometimes by themselves for those situations. So the benefits that for PNP are increased sexual arousal, pleasure, stamina, increases confidence, ability to have sexual adventures, disinhibition. It allows you to escape internal and external experiences of judgment around your desires, and it makes it easier to connect with desired partners. And it's just like you said, the instant creation of the social network as well. And before you start talking about harm reduction, Dave Stewart and also this think tank really say you have to take into account what the drug is doing for them. Because if you immediately go to the harms and preventing it, you're not going to really engage in therapeutic work, because they're going to feel like you don't get it.
Sure,
right?
But that's no different than treating somebody with alcohol, right? You're not going to, the minute you meet somebody who's got a drinking problem, you're not going to start saying, oh, have you thought about your liver, and does your wife like you drunk, what about your kids? Your kids are seeing you intoxicated. Boy, aren't you ashamed? Don't you feel awful?
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first thing.
Right,
And
it's not, in our theme of, or in our version of addiction medicine, it's not the first, second, or third thing really that we would want a clinician to be saying is that bringing out all these negatives. So this is no different.
Yeah, it's no different. But when you look at certain philosophies of care, so as you go through your MI modules, what you'll find is that with Bill Miller, he no longer recommends doing the pros cons. So in the old MI, they used to have a 2x2 table where you look at the pros for, like, we'll talk about it in another session. And one of the reasons he stopped doing was because he doesn't want to talk about the good things of the substance use. For me, I always do. Like, I always do, because I need to know what I'm up against, and I need to find a healthy way they can have the similar experience, and I need to prepare them for the timeline required for it. And with this, it's much longer than any of the other things, right, for that new healthy behavior. Right. So I think as we start to become more skilled and adept at all these different philosophies, we'll know the strengths and gaps of different ones. And for me and you, because whether it's consciously or subconsciously, we've been very heavily influenced by the community reinforcement approach by Robert Myers, we always think about what's the good thing about a drug, right? But in terms of motivational interviewing now, sometimes they immediately jump to the other part, right?
Yeah.
And so, but you're absolutely right. We like, normally the way both of us work, we need to know what a drug does for them, but we don't talk about it forever. We don't end the session on that. Yeah. We make sure that we shift them over, right? So what else does it say here? And then the other part is for newcomers to Canada, right? If you have a newcomer to Canada, maybe they're from a country where it's marginalized, discriminated against, killed. If you're gay, all of a sudden you come here and you're connected, right? You're like, how do you take that away?
And that's not dissimilar from being from a town of 8,000 people, there's a lot of that going on too. I mean, perhaps you're not killed in Canada for being gay, but your life you can be ostracized in a major way.
The stories, when I hear them, they really hit home, because I assumed that places were much more accepting much long ago, but that's clearly not the case, And I think about myself, even in, I was in high school in the 90s, right? And back then, there was maybe a couple of gay people when I was in grade 9 or 10. The stories I know is that they were physically beaten several times. I felt fortunate that I didn't identify as gay or whatever, bisexual, whatever. And because I was like, I wouldn't want to deal with that. And if I did, I would just be silent. I'd be the most hetero person you can imagine. After having that experience, and I didn't realize the impact it has on people.
True, and so you've really kind of nailed it there, right? So you'd be so hetero as possible that you would actually get a wife, and you might have some kids.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what you would do, because that's what often happens.
And for me, that's what I would do consciously, because I saw and it wasn't even as bad as it was in other areas, right? Like I was in Ottawa. Like imagine if I was in a smaller town. Imagine if my family was super religious, right? And every now and then you'll run into someone who's 40 or 50 or 60, and they only realize then. So there's something going on where they just hadn't put it all together.
Yeah, imagine if you came from a town of 7,000 people.
Yeah. You seem like you know somebody who's...
I do know somebody like that, but let's not talk about him right now.
Yeah, definitely know someone like that, yeah. I think it's one of those things where we sometimes try to help the vulnerable. We put them into buckets like, minority or female or this or that. But everyone's individual story has so much potentially there, right? It's hard to really quantify the individual's suffering and stuff. So in this think tank, they went through the treatments. They mentioned that there was really no major pharmacological one, and there still really isn't. There's a couple of signals in the literature, but not a lot. And the therapy really included MI, CBT, the community reinforcement approach, contingency management. And HQ Toronto is a place that I really recommend for people that are undergoing this. But there's a few other ones as well, and they'll have all the resources in the links that we'll share from the talk. So I won't list them all at this point. But I think that was the basics of some party and play, chemsex things. And maybe we'll stop here, and I've got a few questions to ask you, and we'll just do that in the next one.
Awesome. Thanks.